You know when you've got an idea for a photo, a landscape photo, and you go to the location and you set up, you dial in all your settings and stuff right, but it just doesn't quite work for you. You don't get that inspiration, that wow, that magic you're hoping for when you're out there shooting, and you come away feeling a little bit dejected, a little bit beaten up, a little bit defeated. In this video, we're talking about getting around that. There's a few different categories, a few different areas we're going to talk about to consistently come away with a happy headspace when out taking landscape photos. And first of all, the first area we're going to address is your headspace. This is a big one, and there are a few factors that really control how happy you can be with your landscape photos. And I think the most important part to walking away happily is to accept that your photos might be either what I call really pretty or really moody, going for that dramatic high contrast black and white, say, all those bright vibrant colors. And a lot of this comes down to weather. If you go out just wanting to get really, really pretty photos and the weather's miserable, it's going to be hard to get. And if you want to get that fine art, moody kind of dramatic images and it's just like a blue sky kind of day, that can be hard to get too. And so a really big key, and probably the most important part of this whole video, is when you're going out shooting landscapes, be flexible in the style of photography you want to shoot. If you only want to shoot fine art, or if you only want to shoot chocolate box, that's okay, but you will walk away far more consistently happy if you can change your mindset when out taking photos. For example, these two photos I'm showing you on the screen here, one is very, very moody, black and white. It doesn't have to be black and white for the moody side of it, and the other one is far more pretty, vibrant colors. I discovered this from a trip, a very big, important trip to me, where I planned to go away and shoot lots of pretty commercial, like sunsets and wharfs and jetties and trees on hills kind of thing, photos. And when I flew to this location and hired my camper van, the weather just turned to rubbish, and I was feeling really beaten up, really dejected, and I'd committed 2 weeks to this holiday, this photographic trip on my own, and to get around it, I just decided to change that fine art headspace, to go more moody, more dramatic, and shoot a different style of photos. And those photos resulted in me winning New Zealand Landscape Photographer of the Year. The ability to change your headspace will change how happy you can be from a photographic trip. But speaking of the weather, this is one thing, especially in New Zealand here, which can be very hard to control. It seems our weather is so emotional. We can have blue skies one moment and rain within an hour, and then back and forth, and literally 4 seasons in one day. And a good thing to get around this, to really plan your shots, is to scout first and shoot later. No matter what kind of day it is and what kind of weather, the best light is still near that sunrise or sunset. And planning your shots, planning your location, planning alternatives depending on what the weather is going to be like is key. So if you can keep an open mind and find a way to juggle your shots with the weather and be a bit more flexible in what your expectations are from a landscape, the next subject is gear. So first of all, and I guess the main lens that most landscape photographers consider, is a really wide angle option. And I would really stress this, like a super wide lens. Like if you're shooting Fuji like me, the 10-24 or the 8-16. If you're shooting another system, think of this as like a 14 to 16 millimeter equivalent. Those extreme wide angle lenses really add a look that people with their cell phones can't replicate. Either that or going for a good 2 or 3 or 5 shot panoramic. But going for that super wide is key. However, when doing super wide shots, you really need to up your game. And there are a couple of elements you can add to your photos to take them to the next level when shooting super wide. First of all, when you find your subject, whether it is far off in the distance or close by, say you're looking at an old church or mountains off in the background, find a contrasting subject. So for example, if it is the mountain in the background, find a nice rock or a nice branch in the foreground that adds that depth to your photos. If you've got, say, a church, then get like the nice Milky Way sky behind or mountains behind. Find those extra elements, walk around, move around to add more than just one subject, more than just your main subject to your photos. Adding those extra elements takes landscape photos from pretty good to pretty amazing. Leading lines are another real important one. If you find a nice, say, mountain, once again, because that's probably what most of us shoot, walking along and walking around until you find a path that leads towards that mountain will take that photo from pretty good to great. The second bit of gear I'd really recommend is a good telephoto, something around that 200mm equivalent or higher. This shot here, for example, I took out of the van window from the side of the road, and this is taken at maybe 11 AM and pretty average lighting kind of day. But what you can't see here, other than just cropping, is I've removed the roadside, the fence, the scrappy bit of paddock below the frame, just to really simplify the shot. I love the power pylon on the right, I love the hills on the left, and I can see a bit of story there. As an idea, just to also show how much is added to this next frame here is straight out of camera, aside from the cropping, and this shot here is purely just basic editing. And so not much was required to really add this story and really simplify the shot, but it wouldn't have worked unless I'd zoomed in. On this next photo here, this is just a little pair floating just as the first snow of a couple of years ago at a lake down the South Island of New Zealand. And there are lots of pretty mountains behind this little floaty plantoon, poi, I'm not sure what that would be called, this little platform out in the lake, but I love the simplicity of this shot. And as you go wider, there are so many other elements to this, and a lot of those shots can still work, but zooming and simplicity, once again, is something that someone on their phone just can't do to the same quality as you. Going ultra wide or going for that ultra zoom is just adding those extra elements, those point of difference that someone else can't replicate when you're trying to get more from your landscape images. Third bit of gear I'd really recommend, and this is a good bit of kit for all situations, is actually a really bright, good portrait lens, something like an f1.2 or an f1.4, kind of around that 35, maybe even 23 to 50mm range. But why it's so important to have those bright lenses is for when you're trying to add a little bit more atmosphere, a little bit more concentration to what can be a very busy situation, a very busy location. For example, forests are a real famous one, and bush for being far too cluttered and busy. And shooting at that 1.4, that 1.2, I'd probably still recommend stepping down to maybe that f2 just to get that optimal bit of sharpness. Is a great way to separate all the other elements from the subject you're trying to shoot. One technique I really love to do is to actually say, if this is your lens, put something point blank against your lens here. So for example, on these shots you can see on your screen now, there's this little bit of mist around the outsides and near the top of these two shots. What I've done here is found some leaves of a similar color to my subject around me, and they are nearly sitting right against the lens. So as an example, if you can find a big enough leaf, rip a hole in it and put it straight against the lens like that, so you're shooting through it. Because it is so close and because you're shooting at such a bright aperture, it just blurs and adds a little bit of a mist, that little bit of a drama, a little bit extra to your photos, but once again requires that creativity that someone that just picks up a phone and takes a snap cannot achieve. Finally, when it comes to those blue skies, boring kind of days, the only technique I've found to really get around these kind of days is intentional movement. For this, you can quite often require still like an ND filter or a variable ND filter, just you drop your shutter speed close to about a second, and as you're taking shots, do some intentional movements. So for these two shots you can see on the screen here, I've either panned left to right slowly or vertically, just gone like click, like that, just like a very quick shot still, but adding that movement just to add that blur, that bit more of a drama to a location that is otherwise can be quite boring, especially in tricky light. For example, with the trees here, this is shot definitely in the middle of the day. I think those are sand dunes behind some pine trees, and what's key with this photo is to still have very sharp vertical lines. Having that sharpness is absolute key. If you move a little bit left to right as you pan, it doesn't work, but because it's middle of the day, because you've got all the time, you can just do it over and over again. With the ocean shot, with that panning left to right or right to left, I can't remember exactly which one, once again having that very sharp horizon is key. It's a little bit of a technical difference to make it look like it was done intentionally rather than accidentally. So with a flexible headspace, with the ability to change from fine art to chocolate box, we're having a good wide angle lens, a good telephoto lens and a good portrait lens, and the idea, there's little arsenal of intentional movement if the light is just really rubbish and you're still trying to capture something a bit different, something a bit more to your landscape images. I feel like those little keys can really help step your landscape photography game to increase your level of consistency of happiness when you walk away from a situation. If you would like, I'm sure, I haven't made them yet, but I'm sure I can come up with a little cheat sheet. I'll chuck on my website and my Instagram page if you like to download, screenshot, share, whatever you need to do. So when you're out in a location and you're feeling that mental disappointment, a little bit of a drag, that little bit of a, I'm not sure what to do here, check out this cheat sheet and run through those options. Go wide, go zoom, go portrait, maybe add some movement, add those extra elements to your photos to take them from pretty good to next level. As always, guys, if you have any questions about this or if you have any other great ideas for landscape photography, please let me know down in the comments below. If you could like, share and subscribe, it would mean the world to me. But otherwise, guys, until next time, we'll catch you next time.